What's up, everybody? Today, it's about the M chassis. All right, so I've got to change some parts on this M chassis, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to make a Tamiya M chassis video while doing it. I'm super happy to have this because I had a new in-box kit a while ago and I sold it during a cleaning frenzy, and I've regretted it ever since. Well, recently during my RC purchasing sprees, I found a used one for sale in my neighborhood and I snagged it up for a great price. This one is the M05L variant. Front motor, front drive, long wheelbase. Right, so we'll start the video by showing you some parts I've picked up for the chassis, then a sped up edit of me doing some of the work while we talk about the M chassis variants, and maybe you too will become an M chassis fan if you aren't already. Also, stay tuned until the end to hear about amazing and notable versions of the M chassis that I won't be covering too much of in this video. Okay, let's cue the intro. Okay, we're back from the intro, and I do like that melody. Alright, so the body that came with this car originally looked like this, with black and white headlights printed and scotch taped onto the body. So to salvage it, I reached into my decals box and used headlights from a Mini T and taillights from an HPI Hellfire. I think it looks better. Alright, swipe down. I picked up a new chassis for the car. You'll see shortly why in the video. I grabbed a graphite bulkhead stiffener and a graphite upper deck to eliminate the arches on the top of the chassis. I don't really like the way those look. I have uprights that I didn't end up using yet because I don't have the right bearings on hand. Blue steering rod was way too cool to pass up. And finally, a set of speed gears by 3 Racing. Okay, let's get started. But before I do, let me show you why I had to get the new chassis. This previous owner had dremeled the heck out of the chassis to fit a hard case lipo. Savage. Also, the front shock towers, have a look here. Starting to see why it was a good deal. These front shock towers are cracked. Yep, cracked. I don't know. Anyways, let's talk M chassis. Make a note at the top of your head that even numbered M chassis are rear wheel drive and odd numbered M chassis are front wheel drive. And there's 8 main M chassis. There's an RA variant that provides extra ground clearance, and one of my favorites, an all-wheel drive version. More on that later. Or more on those later, I should say. If you're new to the M chassis, you'll find that there are many variants, and it's quite daunting at first to try and understand what you might want. However, there are very good sources online, such as RC Driver and RC Racer, just to name a couple. I'm going to give an overview without going into the chassis sub-variants, so just the overall of the main chassis. The M chassis, or Mini chassis, is special because it was created for the smaller cars of the world. See, when Tamiya makes model RC cars, they like to stay true to scale as much as possible. So for the Mazda Miatas, the Volkswagen Beetles, and the other micro cars, those bodies will now have a scale chassis to sit on rather than your traditional 1/10 scale touring car chassis. We begin with the first M car. Given the chassis code M01, motor placed behind the front axle, driving only the front wheels. Easily distinguishable as an earlier chassis, due to its front and rear lay-down monoshock design. Similar to a lot of the older vintage buggies. With a short wheelbase and loads of body roll, it was said to be a lot of fun to drive. Now, I personally never had one, and I've never driven one, but I'm sure it's just as fun as the newer M chassis cars. The next Tamiya M chassis was released in 1995 with a new feature. A feature that allowed it to fit a wider array of bodies. And that change? Also gave the added bonus of being able to drastically change the driving characteristics by adjusting between 3 wheelbase options. You could choose between 210 millimeters, 225 millimeters, or 239 millimeter wheelbases. This one is the opposite to the M01 chassis when it comes to motor placement, placing the motor in front of the rear axle and driving only the rear wheels. If you take a closer look, it seems as though they pretty much swapped the front and rear suspension, which I guess is easy to do since the steering linkage hangs out in front of the car. I'm glad they decided to rid the monoshock design on the next model, but it wasn't until 3 years later. On July 14, 1998, the M03 released. Drastic chassis changes for stiffening. Gone is the central tub for electronics, and back to front-wheel drive configuration. Tamiya also released a Pro and an R variant of this chassis, but I won't be covering those here. And the M03 lasted for 5 years, until the rear-wheel drive M04 was released on September 10th of 2003 with a beautiful alpha body. Look at this. It was slimmer, lighter, and stiffer. Exciting little rear-wheel drive chassis, and still a popular favorite among M-Cup racers today, but really hard to find parts for. And almost 6 years later, in 2009, perhaps the most influential and still most commonly raced M chassis is the M05. One of the most notable changes is that the steering servo is now placed towards the rear of the chassis for better balance. This one is by far the most popular for class racing, so much so that several other companies sprung up mini chassis as well. Just check out how cool these look going around a track. Tamiya also released a Pro variant and an S-Spec variant. They've got an RA version, which stands for Rally. It's got extra ground clearance. I won't go into depth there, but there's also a version 2 Pro, and a version 2R. Yeah. The next chassis released March 23rd, 2011, the M06. Being an even-numbered chassis, of course it's rear-wheel drive. A nice thing about this version is that it isn't just a previous generation flipped around to transform it from front-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive like we've seen before. It's an actual all-new design. This time, with the rear motor mounted behind the rear axle, like a genuine Porsche 911. Yeah. Well, this gives it a very distinct driving feel, as you can imagine. And with the right tire setup, you can have gobs of traction in the rear. But the yang to that yin is that a simple wrong move can send all that weight in the rear looping around to the front before you know it. For example, the recently released Tamiya VW Carmen Ghia kit provides softer rear tires and harder fronts to aid in stabilizing that agile and nimble handling. Okay, taking a break from fun black ABS plastic chassis for a bit, let's take a few moments to gaze at these pieces of functional art. Up until now, the M chassis were for fun and not serious. However, these two, much like the TA05 M4 that I haven't even mentioned yet, are race-bred, purpose-designed machines with full adjustability and features you'd find on Tamiya's mid to high-end range of touring cars. The M07 concept chassis released in 2017, and the M08 concept chassis released in 2019. The M07 also came in an R variant. And that sort of wraps up, in my opinion, their base M chassis. But then you've got some very notable chassis afterwards. There are two four-wheel drive chassis that wear the M badge. The TLON-styled MF01X that was released June 27th, 2015, and the TA05 M4 that was designed by the original TA05 designer was released December 17th, 2011. Going to be real difficult to get my hands on a TA05 M4, I'm sure, but I need one. The TA05 is one of my favorite touring cars. I've got 3 of them in different variants. The MF01X is still pretty easily found with a Mercedes or a Jimny body, but pretty much sold out everywhere for the Beetle Rally body. But I've been lucky enough to snatch one up. And I look forward to the release of the Ford Escort Rally they've got coming out with this MF01X chassis. I'll be waiting. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please give me a thumbs up. And I got a lot of my information from Tamiya USA, RC Driver, RC Racer, Tamiya Database, RC Scrapyard. Let's go ahead and enjoy a montage now. Thanks again, everybody.